Hello, welcome to my channel, Save Infinity. In this video, I just wanted to kind of talk about the idea of, not being afraid to be the commander of your own reality, like taking authority and that authoritative approach over your own reality, not in like in a a really strong dictatorship way where you go too far with it, but not being afraid to stand in that place of like sovereign power and being the commander over your reality in that aspect, holding strong on your own like morals and integrity and things like that of what you do want to occur and not occur, and what you do feel is appropriate and not appropriate. And not in a way that you're like lashing out or judging others at all, but just not being afraid to stand firm in what you feel should be the case for your reality, because it is your dream. You're not here to like just be a side character in someone else's dream. We're all dreaming our own dream from our own perspective. And so, dreaming your dream from your own command. And from that sense as well, it's kind of like we're all like a little projector light. Like you are the light illuminating your reality, and everyone else you see is kind of just animated by that light you're projecting. You could think of it as from the quantum field, your light goes out and then animates them into life. So you're kind of like you are the main one, so you should be trying to do things from a place of action and creating your reality from a place of what you want to do and what feels right for you, rather than becoming submissive to the illusionary characters that you've illuminated, if you will. And it is like quite a trippy concept to comprehend when we all are like our own little projector, right? Just as everyone is kind of projected in that aspect. It's like then from their angle you're the one who's projected into their reality. But it's not having to worry about that so much, because what they're, say, projecting, if that doesn't resonate with you, then you just may not even filter into their reality, or another version of you may be manifested into their reality, and the same goes vice versa. So trying to have that balance between the light and the dark, if you will. Both do exist, within and without. And so just focusing on only, standing in one aspect then leaves you unbalanced in a sense, because you are both light and dark. And so, if you're standing too much in just the light aspect, that can allow, those more darker sort of aspects to then be, commanded and have authorship by other people in your reality, where they can, have the illusion of having power over you, or by, creating circumstances in your reality that don't exactly resonate with you. Because you're not, embodying that darker aspect, then it has to be embodied by something else. So kind of, taking that authorship back for yourself and embodying both light and dark in, a balanced, cohesive way. And then from the same aspect, if you're just too much, just only in the darker aspect, then you can kind of be in a more like cynical, shadowy reality, and then the light is embodied by others around you that are then enjoying and flourishing in all the light aspects that you're not embodying yourself. And so often we can kind of, the way we're like raised or taught, through societal norms or education or what have you, that, embodying such darker aspects can be like a bad thing. But, it's all just a natural balance and rhythm of the universe. It all depends on, how you embody it. You don't have to go to the extreme. But being able to embody that sense of, command and sovereign power within your own reality for yourself, and not being afraid to do so. you know, and not in a sense that you take it to an extreme and are trying to control other people's realities or what have you, you know, having a non-judgmental observer sort of approach to other people's, you know, actions and realities. But if it's, you know, interfering with your own direct reality, not being afraid to, you know, kind of take that command approach of, you know, just not accepting it and not, you know, allowing that energy to infiltrate your own little bubble. You know, having that loyalty to yourself first and foremost. You know, still being able to be loyal to others, you know, and love others and respect others, but not at the expense of yourself. You know, always having that as the first priority, to respect and, you know, love and be loyal to yourself, you know, first and foremost. And not being able to, you know, afraid to, you know, say no or yes to things or what have you, but not being afraid to, you know, kind of command those outcomes for yourself in order to obtain that, you know, healthy balance of self-love and respect and self-loyalty. Because, you know, as I was saying, fundamentally at the end of the day, you are the projector in your reality, and, you know, you are the, you know, the main character, if you will, of your reality. You know, everyone else is kind of just, you know, projected from your light, so they're almost like, you know, a secondhand aspect in, you know, in that context. Not in, you know, don't take it too far with that sort of, you know, analogy. But just from the sense of there's no point, you know, being disloyal to yourself, or, you know, not having that respect or love for yourself, you know, for the sake of others, when, you know, they're more of like a projection from the quantum field. You know, it is a bit, you know, a bit null and void to do so. So always having that, you know, self-respect and self-loyalty and self-love for yourself first and foremost, and then extending that same energy outwards to others. You know, not being afraid to, you know, put your foot down and say no or yes to things that you do want, or to, you know, commanding those sort of energies within and outside of yourself that don't align, you know, with your true nature, in a way of not feeling like that, you know, you are being, you know, rude or selfish for doing so. You know, kind of, you know, remembering as well, you know, like the God fractal within yourself. You know, you want to show love and loyalty and respect to, you know, the God within yourself. If you, you know, expect, you know, love and loyalty and respect from God and from source itself, you know, like showing love and respect and loyalty to the source energy and to the God within, in order to see that more reflected in your own reality as well, that is also, you know, manifested from, you know, from the source within. So if you're not, you know, really showing that love and respect and loyalty to the source within, then that's not, you know, going to be reflected out back at you either. You know, if you're being a little more, you know, disrespectful to yourself, then you're more likely to manifest circumstances in your reality where people are disrespectful to you, because, you know, it's what you're giving and aligning to yourself, and what is then being projected and reflected, you know, out and back towards you. You know, so often we focus so much on, you know, how we treat others as, you know, and expecting that to be a reflection of our reality to be reflected back, which is, you know, obviously so important to still, you know, love and respect others, absolutely. But with the, you know, the mechanics and the ways that reality does work, a lot of times it's more so important and more so a case of, if you're not giving that love and respect to yourself, no matter how loving and respectful you are to other people, that won't be reflected back at you so strongly, because you're the one projecting that light out to then manifest, you know, certain outcomes and experiences. So you're wanting to do it from a place of self-love and self-respect and self-loyalty, so then such instances can be more easily manifested and reflected back towards you. You're kind of like loving the God within you, so the God outside of you can love you back type vibe, if you will. And again, as I said, you know, not taking it to an extreme approach where you become like, you know, some like authoritative dictator, you know, in your relationships or something, or to a point, you know, where you get, you know, super egotistical or something like that. But having that balance, you know, having that balance between the light and dark aspects in that way that forms like a healthy, cohesive relationship within and without. You know, you can go too far on the extremes of any polarity. You know, you can have like toxic light and toxic dark if you go, you know, too extreme up one of either angle. So trying to have that balance in between the both. You know, not going so extreme up the more darker end that you become, you know, controlling or cynical or any of those sort of things. And also then not up the other spectrum of where you become, you know, a bit more dismissive or what have you of your own and others' experiences. You know, so just yeah, finding that balance in between, which can be hard to do, but just so good to be mindful of. And, you know, as I was saying, you know, not being afraid to do it either. All right, well, I might leave this one here for now. Sending you so much peace, love, light, and blessings as always.